Masechet Sotah Daf Kaf Gimel. With this stuff, we complete the third perek of the Masechet. Mishnah teaches Rabbi Shimon Omer En Zechut Tola B'Mayim Hamarim. In the previous Mishnah, we saw the opinion that says if a woman has merit, then it will delay the punishment for up to 3 years. However, Rabbi Shimon disagrees and says no, there's no such concept. If she's guilty, she will feel the full effect immediately. V'imata Omer Zechut Tola B'Mayim Hame'arerim Madhe Ata Et Hamayim Bifnei כל הנשים השוטות ומוציא אתה שם רע על הטהורות ששתו, שאומרים טמאות הן, אלא שתלת להן זכות. The reasoning of Rabbi Shimon is that if you say that the effects of the bitter waters can delay the punishment, then you're going to weaken the effect, the fear factor of the waters before all women who drink. Right, the most important part of the bitter water is that it's scary, and then hopefully if the woman's guilty, she will admit. But if you say that merit delays, then people won't be so scared because everybody has some merit. So, all right, a woman, even if she's guilty, will say, "Oh, you know what? I helped 3 poor people yesterday. I had a lot of good deeds, and so therefore, you know what? I'll drink, and it'll be okay. It'll get delayed, and so they won't worry about it too much." So that's not a good thing. That's not a good effect. And furthermore, it will also cast a shadow on the women who were innocent and drank, because if they drink and they're innocent and nothing happens, then no longer will people assume, oh, they were innocent, that's why nothing happens. People will say, you know what, she's probably really guilty, but she has merit, so that's why it'll take some time. But you'll see, come back in a year or two, and you're going to see that she's going to blow up. So that a woman who's innocent cannot prove her innocence anymore, and people will continue to say negative rumors about her. So this is a bad idea, Rabbi Shimon says, to believe that merit will delay the punishment. No, if she's guilty, it will happen. The punishment will happen immediately. Now, that will make it scarier, and that will give a definitive proof for those who are innocent that they are innocent. רבי אומר, הזכות תולה במים המערערים, ואינה יולדת ואינה משבחת, אלא מתנוונה והולכת. לסוף היא מתה באותה מיתה. Rabbi says that merit does delay, and he takes care of both of these problems by explaining that if a woman is guilty but has merit, so it's true, she will not die right away, but she will not be able to give birth, and she won't feel well, she won't do better, but rather the opposite. She will progressively deteriorate until in the end she dies the same death as a Sotah. But you'll be able to see the effects immediately, right? Some effects immediately. They'll be slight and then grow. So that way, first of all, it will be scary because already, from day one, you're going to start deteriorating. So that's not good. That's not good. That's scary. And furthermore, if nothing happens and she looks well and is healthy and it gets pregnant, then that will prove immediately that she's innocent. So there's no problem of the Mosi Shem Ra. And so that's why that way to be can answer Rabbi Shimon's questions and still uphold the principle that merit can delay. נטמאת מנחתה עד שלא קדשה בכלי, הרי היא ככל המנחות ותיפדה. Now, if a woman's sotah offering becomes tameh, and this would be true in general for korban mincha that becomes tameh before it goes into a holy vessel. So the person just bought this flour from their home and it became tameh. So then that only has, since it had a verbal designation, I'm going to use this flour for my korban mincha. So it's consecrated monetarily, but it's not consecrated begufo. Therefore, you can just redeem it and take the monetary value and go use that to buy new flour. And so that's an easy solution. However, if this flour was put into a holy vessel, then it gets kiddushat haguf, which can't simply be redeemed by money. It has intrinsic holiness. If it becomes tameh, now it cannot be used on the altar. Instead, it has to all be burnt on one of the fires that's on the Har Habayit, but not on the altar. It has to be destroyed. Now, in addition to cases of tum'ah, where the flour itself becomes tameh, here's other cases where we have to burn the mincha offering, but cannot offer it in the normal way. The normal way to offer it is to take a kometz, put that on the mizbeach, and the rest of it the kohanim eat. But the following will be exceptions in which you cannot do that. If either the woman admitted her guilt, or witnesses came and said, we saw that she was guilty, she sinned with that adulterer, in that case, there's no need for her to drink anymore to continue with the Sotah ceremony, because we know she's guilty. And so therefore, that we're stopping short, but the mincha flour already became sanctified, we can't use it, and therefore it's burnt on one of the fires. Haomer eni shotah, v'sheba'ala eno roseh lahashkotah, v'sheba'ala ba'aleha baderech. If a woman says, I refuse to drink, and we're assuming this would be before they erased Hashem's name. If it was after erased Hashem's name, then they would force her to drink. If it was before, then we don't force her to drink. So again, the mincha offering stops short. Or if the husband says, I don't want my wife to drink, I don't want to see her, even though I'm angry and I called her Sotah, I don't want her to have to drink and blow up. It's bad. So if he doesn't want her to drink, she doesn't drink, but they already brought the flour and put it in a holy vessel, so now it has to be burnt. Furthermore, if the husband was with her on the way, and in that case where we saw the Sotah, or can only go ahead with the Sotah if the husband is completely innocent. But if he sinned, and one way of his sinning is by being with her on the way, after a husband accuses his wife of being a Sotah, he's no longer allowed to be with her. In that case also, since she can't drink, but you do have this flour, so the flour has to be burnt. And now furthermore, another case where you would burn all of the flour, and the Kohanim can't eat any of it, is if the Sotah is married to a Kohen. Or actually, any time a woman brings a Korban Mincha, and she is married to a Kohen, the Mincha offering is burnt. There is a general rule that all minachot that a kohen brings cannot be eaten, have to be burnt. Pasuk in Vayikra is quoted right here. So if a male kohen, brings a korban mincha for any reason, it could be a voluntary mincha or obligatory mincha, any kind of mincha offering, that normally, if a Yisrael or a Levi brought it, the kohanim would eat part of it. That's the standard korban mincha. The kohen takes a kometz, the kometz goes on the mizbech, the kohanim eat the rest. That's only true if the one bringing the korban, the Baal, is not a kohen. If the Baal is a kohen, then you don't do the kometz. Rather, the whole entirety gets burnt. No kometz that goes in his beach, and nobody eats it. The whole thing goes in his beach. No leftovers. That is the standard. So now the korban sotah, because it's brought as a partnership between the husband and the wife. He's asking her to bring it. He has to provide for the flour, but she's also bringing it. It's on her behalf. So it has aspects of both. And therefore, it has to be all burnt. בת ישראל שנישאת לכהן מנחתה נשרפת, וכהנת שנישאת ישראל מנחתה נאכלת. If it's a בת Yisrael who's married to a kohen, then it's burnt. That's the same thing. Nisuot lekohanim, and it doesn't matter what her status was. If she was a bat kohen or bat Levi or bat Israel, it doesn't matter. Her korban mincha is burnt. Whereas if she was a bat kohen who married a Yisrael, now it has the same status as a Yisrael. In which case, you put the kometz on the mizbeach and the leftovers are eaten. So it goes by the status of the husband. If the husband is a kohen, then the entire korban mincha is burnt. Ma ben kohen lekohenet. So now that we mentioned this distinction here between well, the man being a Kohen versus the woman being a Kohen. So now we're going to mention other times where there's a difference between a Kohen and a Kohenet. Minchat Kohenet ne'echelet u'minchat Kohen ena ne'echelet. Number one is what we just mentioned, that Korban Mincha of a female Kohen, you're going to take the kometz on the mizbech and the rest of it will be eaten. Whereas the mincha of a male kohen is not eaten at all. It's entirely burnt on the mizbeach. Kohenet mitchalelet ve'kohen en mitchalel. If a woman marries someone that she's not permitted to marry, she becomes a halala. This applies to a kohenet, but actually applies to any woman. And after that, she will not be able to marry a kohen. However, the reverse is not true. If a kohen marries someone he's not allowed to marry, like if a kohen marries a divorcee, so their children will be halalim, and the kohen, while he's married to her, will not be able to serve as a kohen. However, if he gets divorced, then that kohen can marry anybody he wants. So the kohen himself does not become a kohen himself. Who enters in an improper marriage does not himself become a halal, even though a woman who has illegal marriage, she becomes a halala and she cannot marry a kohen. Another difference, kohenet mitamea lametim, ven kohen mitamea lametim. If a female kohen is allowed to become tameh lamet, right? If a woman, a bat kohen, a loved one dies, anyone dies, she's allowed to go to a cemetery. But a male kohen is not allowed to go to the cemetery except for one of the 7 closest relatives for a regular kohen. Kohen ochel bekodshei kodashim ve'en kohenet ochelet bekodshei kodashim. Only a male kohen can eat the highest level of sacrifices, like korban hatat or asham, that the kohanim eat part of it. That's only the male kohanim. This has to be eaten in the Bet HaMikdash, right, with very strict rules. And a female kohen, bat kohen, cannot eat kodshei kodashim. Ma ben ish leisha. Now that we mentioned differences between male and female kohanim, now we're going to list a few differences in general between laws of men and laws of women. This is not a comprehensive list, just some of them. Haish porea uforem ve'en haisha porat uforemet. A man has to let his hair grow and tear his garments when he's a mesorah, but this does not apply to a female mesorah. Haish madir et beno ben nazir ve'en haisha madiret et bena ben nazir. A man can make a vow on behalf of his minor son that his minor son will become a nazir. But a mother cannot make a vow for her son, that is for him to be a nazir, right? Only a father can do that. If a father became a nazir and designated animals for the end of his nazirut, but then died before he used them, the son can then use those very same animals for the end of his nazirut. A son can do that, but a daughter cannot use the leftover sacrifices from her father. Haish mekadesh et bito ve'en haisha mekadeshet et bita. A father can give his wife over in kiddushin. A mother cannot do that on a deoraita level when the daughter is a minor. Haish mocher et bito ve'en haisha mocheret et bita. A father can sell his daughter as a slave. A mother cannot sell her daughter as a slave. Haish niskal arum ve'en haisha niskelet aruma. A man, if he deserves capital punishment by stoning, is stoned without clothing, whereas a woman is not stoned without clothing. Haish nitle ve'en haisha nitlet. A man's body, after he is killed by capital punishment, is hung, right, for the rest of the day, whereas a woman's body is not hung. Haish nimkar bignevato ve'en haisha nimkeret bignevata. A man who steals and cannot pay is sold as a slave to pay for his what he stole, whereas a woman is not sold if she cannot pay what she stole. All right, so that's a non-comprehensive list, and we're going to go through most of them. So we begin. Tenor Rabbanan. Kol nesuot lichuna minchotehen nisrafot. So here's a Tosefta that's going to elaborate on the Mishnah that anyone who's married to a Kohen, whereas normally a Sotah's mincha, you take a kometz and put it on the mizbeach. The rest of it the Kohanim eat. However, if the husband is a Kohen, he has a share in it, and therefore you cannot eat the leftovers. Rather, it has to be burnt. Now, how are you going to do it exactly? If it was just a Kohen by himself brings a regular Korban Mincha, it all is allowed to be burnt on the Mizbeach. But this one is more complicated because she also has a share in it. So you have to do something. So Kesad, Kohenet Leviyav Yisraelit, Sheniset leKohen. It really doesn't matter where the woman comes from, just the fact that she's married to a Kohen. And minchata nechelet mipnei sheyesh lo chelek ba. The Kohanim cannot eat the leftovers after the kometz because he has a share in it. On the other hand, you can't put it all on the Mizbeach because she has a share in it. Since she has a share in it, so part of it the kometz will be taken and put on the Mizbeach, and there is a law that if part of it is put on the Mizbeach and the other part is leftovers, then you cannot put leftovers on the Mizbeach. Rather, you take the kometz and you put that on the mizbeach. That's for her share because she needs the kometz to be separated and put on the mizbeach. And then the rest of it, the leftovers, well, the Kohanim cannot go and eat it because he has a share. So you take that and you put it on the Mizbeach separately. But you're putting it on separately, that way the kometz is for her, and then the rest of it will burn on the Mizbeach separately. Now we're going to have to analyze exactly how this works because there is a problem. Ikri kan, the Gemara says, Kol shehu mimenu la'ishim, harehu bebal taktiru. This is a midrash on this pasuk. Says, Ki chol su'or v'chol debash lo taktiru mimenu ishe ladonai. So this on the Peshat level teaches us that you can't put su'or and devash on the mizbeach. That's a general rule all year round, every korban, every mincha. However, there's an extra word mimenu. You could have just said kol su'or v'chol debash lo taktinu. Why do we need the word mimenu? From the word mimenu, we learn that any time that you have put a part of a korban mincha on the mizbeach, you cannot put the leftovers on the mizbeach as well. In other words, if you have a regular korban mincha that Yisrael brings, so part of it you put on the mizbeach, and the leftovers the Kohanim eat. Good, Shalom al Yisrael. If a Kohen brings alone his own mincha, then you don't separate a kometz. You put the whole thing on the mizbeach. That's also fine, because that's the whole thing. But if there is a case of mimenu, that you took a kometz and put it on the mizbeach, then lo tatiru. You cannot put the rest of it on the mizbeach. And here, what you just said in this Tosefta is that's exactly what you do. You take the kometz, you put that on the mizbeach, and then the rest also kerevin, separately. But you're not allowed to do that. Doesn't that violate the mimenu principle? Amar Yehuda bered Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi temasik lehu leshum asim keRabbi Eliezer. D'Tanya Rabbi Eliezer omer l'reach nechoach ata ma'aleh aval ata ma'alehu leshem asim. Here's what you do when you put the leftovers on the mizbeach. You have in mind that this will be as fuel. Just like you can add wood to the mizbeach. When you put the wood on the mizbeach, you're not sacrificing the wood. Wood is not something that you can sacrifice. It's not an animal. It's not flour. Rather, this is fuel. So too, in this case, when you take the kometz, you say, the kometz, I'm putting it on, that's as a korban because that's for her share. But the rest of it, which I'm not allowed to put the leftovers on the mizbeach, so you know what I have in mind. This is I'm putting this on as fuel, and that will help burn other things, and that's permitted according to the Rabbi Eliezer. Because Rabbi Eliezer, in a different case, where it's complicated. We don't know what to do with the stuff. Do we put it on Mizbeach or not? If there's a mixture of things that you're supposed to put on Mizbeach and not supposed to Mizbeach, so Rabbi Eliezer says, just have in mind, if it's supposed to be on it, so then it's a sacrifice. If it's not, I'm putting it for firewood. Okay, so that's how we can solve the problem according to Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, so fine, that solution worked for Rabbi Eliezer, who says you can put things on the Mizbech that don't belong there as long as you have in mind that it's for fuel. But Rabbanan disagreed with Rabbi Eliezer. So according to them, what are you going to do with the leftover flour? Tavdir lehu Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Shimon. The Tanya Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Shimon omer hakomes kadabasmo v'shirayim mitpazrin al bet hadeshen. A different solution. That you have the Sotah, she brings the flour. So you take a kometz and put it on the Mizbeach. That's from her perspective, and that needs to be done. Because she is not a Kohen, so that's fine. Now, from his perspective, the rest of it you can't give to the Kohanim to eat because the man is a Kohen. You can't put it on the Mizbeach because of the lo taktiru mimenu principle. So instead, what do you do with the rest? You put it on Bet Hadeshen, on the place where the ashes are, where you burn pasul sacrifices. So you burn it on the ashes, on the fire, next on Harabayit, but not on the altar. And so that's a different way of solving the problem. V'afilu Rabbanan la pligi ale de Rabbi Elazar b'Rabbi Shimon ela b'minchat choteh shel kohanim debat hakravahi aval beha afilu Rabbanan modu. Now this solution will be good not only according to Rabbi Elazar but Rabbi Shimon, who originally said this type of solution in a different case, in a minchat choteh of a kohen. Minchat choteh is the olev yored for certain sins. If you're rich, you bring an animal or a bird. If you're poor, you bring a meal offering. If it happens to be a kohen who made this type of sin and is bringing this meal offering, so in that case there was a machloket. And Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon said, you take the kometz and put it on the mizbeach, and the rest of it you put on bet hadeshen. And so he applies the same thing here. But in that case, Rabbanan disagreed, and they said, no, don't take a kometz, put the whole thing on the mizbeach. That's what they said over there. But even Rabbanan, even though they disagreed with Rabbi Elazar, in the case of a minchat choteh shel kohanim, in that case they only disagreed because it was the meal offering needs to be put on the mizbeach. So that's why they said put the whole thing on the mizbeach. But in this case, even the Rabbanan would agree with the solution of Rabbi Elazar ben Rabbi Shimon that here you have to take a kometz because for the woman's share, she needs the kometz to be taken and put on mizbeach, and then the rest of it you can't put on the mizbeach. So for the rest of it, put on bet hadeshen. So Rabbanan, even though they disagree in that case, agree in this case, and this would apply not only to a Sotah married to a kohen, but actually any time a woman who's married to a kohen brings a korban mincha, you'd have to make a compromise situation like this. Okay, now Mishnah next stated that Bat Yisrael HaNesu'ah, in general, anytime any woman is married to a kohen and she brings a korban, it cannot be eaten. It has to be burnt. What's the reason for this? Ma'ita'amad amar kera v'chol minchat kohen kalit tiyeh lo te'achel kohen ve'lo kohenet. So if it's a male kohen, anytime a male brings a korban, and even if his wife brings a korban, he has a share in it. So the same law applies. It cannot be eaten. That's the explicit pasuk. However, if it's a bat kohen who brings a korban, that is like a Yisrael that brings it. They take the kometz and the rest of it is eaten. Because we say here, the word kohen here means only a male kohen, and not a female bat kohen. Good. Kohen et mitchalelet, kohen and mitchalel. The Mishnah mentioned that a female does become a halala. If a woman, in fact, any woman who marries illegally can then not marry a kohen. but it's not true for a Kohen. A male Kohen, if a male Kohen marries illegally, after he's divorced, then he can marry any woman. It does not affect his status anymore once he gets divorced. Minelan, how do we know this? Damar kera, velo yechalel zar'o be'amav. Zar'o mitchalel, vehu eno mitchalel. This is not the full discussion. The full discussion is Kiddushin, but from here, we don't learn about the woman, but rather about the man. Where it says, lo yechalel zar'o be'amav. So we learn from here that the offspring of a Kohen who marries illegally will become halalim, but he himself will not become a halal. So it does not affect the male Kohen, it affects his offspring, and over there it also explains that it affects his wife, but not him. Kohenet mitame'a, maita'ama. A bat Kohen is allowed to become tameh lamet. What's the source? Amar kera emor el kohanim bnei Aharon velo benot Aharon. In the beginning of Parashat Emor, where it says, "Go tell the Kohanim, the sons of Aharon, lenefesh lo yitama be'amav, they cannot become tameh lamet." That's talking about bnei, the sons of Aharon. It does not apply to the daughters of Aharon. They can become tameh. Kohen ochel bekodshe kodashim dichtiv kol zachar b'bnei Aaron yochelena. The highest level of sacrifices can be eaten only by male Kohanim, because the pasuk says kol zachar. It says very explicitly, all the males of the sons of Aharon, they can eat these highest level sacrifices. Uma ben ish. And the Mishnah continued and noted differences between laws that apply to men as opposed to women. Tanur banan ish enli ela ish isha minayin. So this is about a mesorah that he lets his hair grow and tears his garments. So the pasuk says ish. So I know I know that an ish can become a mesorah. How do I know that the whole law of mesorah applies to women? Ish keshu omer v'hasarua asher bo. The next pasuk says hasarua. You don't have to repeat. You already said aish. You could just say him. Why do you have to say the leper? So that implies that there is another type of person that can become a leper. So an ish and an isha, both men and women, can become mesoraim haren kan shenaim. So we know that the law of mesorah in general does apply to men and women. If so, then why does the first pasuk say ish? Just say anyone. So the male part of this here applies to the law that will come later in the paragraph, that a man has to let his hair grow and rend his garments, but a woman who is a mesorah does not have to do those things. Next case, Haish madiret beno ben nazir ven Aisha maderet et bena ben nazir. A man can take an oath on behalf of his minor son to make him a nazir. A mother cannot do that. Amar Rabbi Yochanan halachahi ben nazir. Rabbi Yochanan says this is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. There's no source for it. Haish megalach al nazirut aviv and Aisha megalachat al nazirut aviha. Rabbi Yochanan halachahi ben nazir. And similarly, this law that a man can use the sacrifices that his father designated when he was a nazir, but he died before using them, the son can use those same animals, but a woman cannot use the animals of her father who were unused if she is a nazir. And this also is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai with no source. Haish mekadeshet bito v'naisha mekadeshet et bita. Only a father can marry off his minor daughter. Dichtiv et biti natati laish hazeh. This is in the law of Mosi Shem Ra. It's giving the typical case, and the father comes and says, I married my daughter off to this person. So we see that the father can do that. Haish mocheret bito. The father can do that, but not the mother. And furthermore, a father can sell his daughter as a slave. Because the pasuk there says, if a man sells his daughter, so that is only the father, not the mother. So a pasuk says that for a certain sin, the whole congregation stones him, male. So does that mean only a male can get stoned? That's not true, because in Devarim and Yud Zayin, in a different context, it says, For you take the man or the woman who did this terrible sin and stone either one of them. So women certainly can get stoned. Therefore, in Pasuk in Perek 24, why does it say only Otah? El Otah belo kesuto, velo Otah belo kesuta. Rather, it shows that there's a distinction. Only a man gets, when he gets stoned, he without clothes on. You're just a small covering for his privates, but otherwise no clothes, which is actually, it's better for him because he'll die faster with less suffering. But for the woman, it doesn't say, so for women is different. That's why Otah only applies to man, not to women. A woman can get stoned, but not without clothes on. Even though the clothing will be as a little bit of padding that will prolong her suffering, is true. However, for a woman, the shame of not being clothed is worse than that extra physical pain that she will undergo by having the clothes on. She would rather have the clothes on. A man would rather have the clothes off. Haish nitle ve'en haisha nitle. So after a person gets capital punishment, then you hang the body just for a short time until, from before sunset till sunset, as to set an example. Look, everybody, this is what happens. But we don't leave it hanging there for long, because it is, after all, Tselem Elokim. They only do that for a man who gets capital punishment, not for a woman. Only a male, not a female. Right? In all these cases is a good methodological question. When do we assume that a masculine pronoun really refers only to men, or to the collective of everyone, men and women? And there are cases of both. And so in most of these cases here, we're assuming that a masculine pronoun refers only to men. In some cases, that limits the woman's rights, like for over her son or daughter. But in other cases, it actually saves her from this kind of terrible shame of having to be hung. So I guess it works both ways. Haish nimkar b'gnevato v'naisha nimkeret b'gnevata ma'itama amar kera v'nimkar b'gnevato v'lo b'gnevata. And here also is would be for the detriment of the man, that a man is sold for stealing, whereas a woman is not, because it says, and if he cannot pay, then he is sold for his theft. Only a man is sold, but a woman is not sold. Hadran alach haya notel chazakim uberuchim.